Afternoon and welcome to the fifth week of the Health New England Where Your Health Matters webinar series. My name is Keith Ledoux and I'm the Vice President of the Commercial Sales and Business Development Division at Health New England. I want to thank all of you for being with us here today. We are very excited to discuss why caregivers matter during these challenging times where home and work responsibilities have shifted for many of us. Our mission at Health New England is to improve the health and the lives of the people in our communities. This is why we're having these series and sharing them with you today. We will be discussing various topics today, as you see on the screen. And I know many of you have experienced many challenges with the pandemic. Just some quick housekeeping items before we get started. All of our webinars are going to be recorded and found on our Health New England YouTube webpage. You'll also receive a follow-up email with the YouTube link along with a survey link. Your feedback is very important to Health New England, so I thank you in advance for taking the time to complete that. I am very excited today to introduce our presenter, Kirsten Wright-Cirit. She is a certified holistic health coach and founder of Your Wellness Scout in Massachusetts. Kirsten holds a BA degree in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on cultural studies from UNC Chapel Hill. Her company is a health coaching and corporate wellness consulting practice that integrates substantial wellness programs and solutions for all of us in our daily lives. She has 17 years of industry experience. She has the passion for the effects of food and stress on the way people live, work, and play. Today, we'll look at how Kirsten can help us with understanding how best we can juggle a bunch of things like career, parenting, family. And for many of you who are caring for a parent or a loved one, the stress that is caused by that, she's going to help us navigate some principles on how we can do that. So I want to thank all of you for being here again today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Kirsten.
Thank you, Keith, to unmute myself. And thank you, Health New England, for having me here. I'm excited to present today. We have a lot of information to go through. So I just want to give just a quick reiterating of what Keith had mentioned, but also let you know that I've been in a lot of your positions. I compromised health for work, and I witnessed how sharing and implementing health changes improved attitudes, as well as resulted in results with productivity, relationships, physical health, mental health, and more. And then I had a kid, and it changed everything. So I repivoted a lot of my business and looked at, all of that juggling to fit in wellness is a whole different level, whether you have a kid, whether you have caring for elders, whether you have sick at home. And so I'm very happy today to sit here and talk to you all about how we can discover sustainable solutions to fit into your daily life without adding too much more. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I always love to start these types of presentations with, is this how you feel? And I think a lot of us feel this way now, right? Pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and maybe even after pandemic, we will continually to have this, spousal communication conflicts, feeling overworked, messy rooms, messy house, too many things to do and such. And oftentimes we're told and want to strive to feel like this, right? Sleep, meditation, all those wellness, check boxes ticked. But sometimes that's not always the case, right? And sometimes we have to understand that it's very easy to just make sure we don't, it's very hard to just always try to keep adding and adding and adding. And oftentimes, this is hard enough without adding in the emotions of caregiving, right? Caregiving is very, very, it's a challenge, it's a positive, it's such a wonderful way of having some love and fulfillment, but it's also one in which it can have a lot of stress too. So today, what I'd like to tell people is that I'd love for everyone to set an intention. That's what I always try to do with these sessions. I know you might be watching something else or looking at email or juggling. And oftentimes I find that, what is your intention? Set one for today. figure out one thing you want to take away. Why are you here? What's your why? Are you trying to understand your caregiver guilt? A lot of times there's guilt, like I didn't spend enough time, I didn't call them, I didn't go take care of them, I had the kid watch too much TV, whatever it is, we'll go through a list of them. Would you like to have more self-care and balance? Are you trying to create a more supportive environment? Are you trying to be more mindful and meditative? Whatever it is, try to make sure you pick one thing that resonates with you today so that you can walk away feeling you have one tool in your toolbox to start with tomorrow. We're not going to go through everything in such detail, but we want to do a high level view of what are some challenges, how can we implement some tips, and what can you incorporate tomorrow, maybe next week or next month. So our learning objectives for today is we're going to talk about the challenges as a working parent, caregiver, the mental, physical, and social effects. As I said, I'm going to go through that high level because I know that many of you already know about that. Then we'll talk about tips and resources to alleviate the pressure. We'll try to highlight some of those that resonate most with you. I have a poll question. Hopefully that'll help that. And then we'll really discuss about parent and caregiver guilt. I talk about this because I think it's such a troubling thing when I've done working parents programs at companies. There's a lot of parents who have guilt, and especially in the sandwich generation, those who are taking care of kids and elders. How do I do it all and not stress myself too thin? And then we'll talk about overcoming it and learning how to thrive. So first, just to get an idea of who you are that's watching me today, I'm going to start a poll. So are you taking care of the following? And you can answer as many of them. So if you're taking care of a newborn and an adult, please check both. Are you taking care of 6 to 17, 18 plus, a disabled, health compromised family member? I'll give it another minute or two. And I'll give it a couple more seconds. So again, you can answer multiple times. Okay. So it looks like, okay, so we're going to end poll. So some of you should see the results. And if you see the poll question still up on your screen, you can actually close it out you have to close it out yourself by Xing out the box. Just wanted to let you know. So I know like our front runner, it looks like aging parents and 6 to 17-year-olds, followed by 18-year-olds and newborn and disabled. Okay, great to know. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started on talking a little bit more about this too. And one of the things I always like to talk about is time. When I hear a lot of caregivers and parents and everyone saying is time, and it's what were you doing with your time before you had all these caregiving responsibilities, right? I sometimes look back at my younger self and say, why wasn't I, getting more degrees, or why wasn't I reading all these books, or why wasn't I doing this? Because as soon as you start, multiplying your needs and your responsibilities, you realize time is so important, right? But, as we've also in the last, 10 to 20 years, we've got, more apps and more things that tell us we're saving time, but are we really? Do we have more time? We've added more things. And so sometimes I feel like time is relative, especially with COVID now. We seem to have more time because we aren't commuting as much and maybe we aren't as many social activities, but yet now we're juggling a lot of the responsibilities that have been previously outsourced, maybe even unknowingly. So time is one of those big things that, think about it, is that you can't make more time, but it might be reprioritizing and shifting your time. And a lot of times what I do is I talk more about reshifting and prioritization versus adding in more things. I will talk a lot about adding in good food to crowd out the bad food, or unhealthy versus healthy food, but I try not to talk about too much adding in when we know we already have on our plate when it comes to balance and meditation and more, but we'll get talking into that sooner. First, I want to talk about, childcare cost in the pandemic. The cost of before the pandemic, there was 2/3 of parents said that prior to having children, they did not expect the cost of childcare would influence their career decisions. And this is from care.com. And that, moms, I know dads too, but moms especially felt the impact of care challenges on their careers, changing jobs, getting higher. Care.com did 2019 cost a survey, and they said that about that majority thought that the cost, the light blue, cost of childcare would not influence career decisions. They thought it would be, they thought 60% thought that it would not influence, and and about 45% thought it would influence their career decisions. But in actuality, 54% have had to make workplace changes, right? And 71% say their job has been impacted. And this is due to COVID and the childcare and also other care struggles, not just childcare, but other care struggles. 35% are now considering in-home care, but note that in-home care costs almost double sometimes as some childcare centers, depending on where you live and in what part of the country. And women statistically have been shouldering this work, but we know dads have been trying to do a lot of it too. It's just both, but there is just so much more pressure for that care. And 47% are more concerned childcare costs will increase. And actually 41% of moms are doing more of the work, whereas 15% of the dads are doing more of the work. But, again, their burdens are all over, women, men too, but they're statistically speaking that women have been shouldering more of the work. Now, we're not going to get too much into stats, but I just want to say that, this is one of those challenges. Now, childcare was an issue in the US before. Care in general was a big issue. Now imagine after the pandemic. So no wonder you're starting to feel a challenge, right? So this is our second poll question to understand your challenge. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to caregiving and your health? Now, what I want to tell you is that you can pick 2 or 3. When I say biggest, I also mean you can pick multiple. So go ahead. Is it sleep? Is it healthy eating? Reducing toxic load, physical movement, self-care, burnout, juggling virtual school or isolation? If all of those are some of your bigger challenges, go ahead and pick all of them. But I'm just trying to understand, because there are a lot of challenges, what this audience is, they say some of their biggest challenges are. And this comes with the caregiving in sense of, if you're feeling like, you are racing around going to your parents' house, and then you're trying to take your kids to the playground, or maybe you're trying to juggle work, you're not eating well, right? Because you're just constantly just snacking, let's say. So it's been very difficult to spend the time. There's that word again, time on that. All right, I'll leave it open for a little bit more. Yes, self-care, mental health, burnout, sleep, physical. So yeah, the movement, self-care, mental health is huge. Mental health is huge these days. It's something that we've all realized has been very hard in various ways at all different ages. All right, so we'll go ahead and end that. And remember to X out. X out after you've closed out the screen. So I'm going to talk about some of the challenges, but I'm not going to go into them too deeply because I think that's why you're all here. You know what they are. But just so as a reminder, maybe some more will resonate with you, and you can see how they're linked. As there's no care, no help. We've talked about the cost. You've got early or late meetings. How can you take care of maybe you have elders at home or around the corner, or you have meetings, you have children, no time to prepare home cooked meals, lack of sleep, reduced healthy habits, and then COVID isolation and fear, right? You've been racing around trying to do all these things within the home even. It's a new juggle, a new balance, shifting identities. Are you a mom? Are you a dad? Are you a child to an elder? Are you a spouse? Are you a friend? Are you a caregiver to someone who's been at home, either disabled or sick, and now you have a new role of a really much more intensive caregiver? That is different than a mom or a dad or a kid. Or a child. Have you had some relationship shifts, connectivity lost? I know that there's been a lot of negativity on social media and rifts between people because of their beliefs. And a lot of that is also exasperated because we can't just sit down and meet with them and face to face and say, let's talk about this, right? There's career development. How can you have career development when you feel like you can't produce as well? Financial upheaval, distracted, and competing demands of keeping up. So I think you know all these, but why is this so important? Because it has effects. We've talked about being burned out, tired, exhausted, right? It's going to affect you. You're less resilient, less adaptable. The more stressed you get and the more unable you are to understand how your reactions to stress can be toxic, the less resilient you become. Resiliency and thriving is often so much on having really a healthy coping mechanisms and understanding how your reaction exasperates the stress. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. Inability to focus, juggling too much. I know sometimes that's not a choice. Lack of inspiration, motivation, physical health, we talk anxiety, worry, depression. Please do not like focusing has been out the door. I mean, I tell you, I call it COVID focus. You try to sit down and you try to do work, even if you have the time. And I find my mind is in 5 different directions, worrying about this or thinking about that. So there's a new term, COVID focus, I feel. Your career track affected. Even before COVID, working from home and having children or others to care for, you always felt like you were going to be, the term is mom tracked. I know it could be dad tracked, but you know, it's a lot that feeling that you're not going to get those professional development. If you're at home juggling kids or elders or others, you oftentimes have to ask your coworkers for help, right? And how often do you feel like you can keep doing that? And that's oftentimes creates that hardship relationship between your colleagues. Decreased social connectivity. The health effects, questionable and shamed contact with family or friends. And I've talked about this before. You know, I have kids that want to go to the playground and play with each other. Can I do that? Will I be shamed? Am I going to go fly and see somebody? What will happen? And those are questions we never had to deal with. And this panopticon of having people watch you and question what you're doing, that's quite a mental load on you. So you have to remember that this is new and that you're not used to juggling all these different questions and it has its toll on you. Eventually, as I said, pre-COVID, with so much of the childcare financial struggles of juggling caregiving, oftentimes 55, it was a stat about, and this is back in 2017, about 45% of women who had returned to work ended up leaving work after a period of time due to the care restraints. And this has an impact on everybody, even your community. So we know there's challenges. We've talked meal planning, identity crisis, child care activity challenges, spousal support, health and safety, all of these, right? I mean, I could just go on and on. 2 of the ones that I also want to focus on a little bit later after we talk about some of the tips and resources for some of these tangible ones is acknowledging the emotions of caregiving and mom and parent guilt and caregiver guilt and patience. So those are things we're really going to focus on too, because if you can make yourself feel a little bit better about how you're caregiving, there's a domino effect of positiveness, of positive psychology that can help you stay motivated in achieving some of your goals in the realms of sleep and meal planning. It's all interconnected. It's your body, mind, and physical, and your beliefs are all connected. So it's really key to try to hone in that when you fix one, or not fix, but when you alter one, you may be altering others. So now that we know as the challenges and effects, let's talk about the tips and resources to alleviate. So there's this disease of being busy, I call it. There was a great article years ago about that, is that oftentimes our self-worth is tied to being busy. I mean, do we really need to be that busy? You know, is it a badge of honor when we say, oh, I've got this activity, I'm going here, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. This may have been quieted down a little bit with the pandemic, but I still think there is this, oh, well, you know, I've got my kids signed up for this, or I'm able to do these activities, or I'm taking on this many reports. And it really doesn't mean that you need to take on all of that, question whether that's associated with your self-worth. Sometimes it's easier to slow down. And by slowing down, you can actually achieve more. It's easier said than done, but some of these tangible resources are resources and tips and techniques I'm going to provide you have to do oftentimes with slowing down. And there's also a handout that you'll be receiving later about 10 tips to slow down. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but how you can slow down to achieve more. So some tangible resources about, how can I help this juggle? What are some tips to help me with the challenges in juggles? Some of these are, are post pandemic and kind of now, but still looking at it. There's a lot of ways, care.com, Bright Horizons, subsidized childcare cost. Don't hesitate if you feel comfortable reaching out for babysitting help, whether it be a share, whether it be elder care help. Remember, there is help and support. Look at your company. Do they have wellness programs? There's a lot of companies now pivoting their services. They may not have the on-site fitness center, but they now have access to online resources. A lot more companies are understanding and investing in mental health. Don't hesitate to reach out to them to say, look, I need help in a certain area. We would feel so much better if I had that 12-to-1 online yoga session. Can you provide that for me? There are a lot of resources. Like I said, one of these are some lists of them. But one that I wanted to point out was, and I'm not affiliated with them. I love the care.com has that scope of child care, elder care. I think they're now doing pet care, household care. They've completely expanded the scope of what they do, and they provide. You can look for nanny services, babysitter services, just one-off services, elder care, as I said. So there's lots of resources and companies popping up there to help with this juggle. And don't hesitate to outsource. If you're somebody who's like, well, I got to cook all my meals and I got to go pick out my groceries, I'm sorry. If right now you need to take a shortcut that works for you. Make sure it falls within your regime of what you need to accomplish. And, you can always swap it out. Try these different things. These are some food deliveries. It's really easy. Maybe you do this and you supplement with once every so often you go to the grocery store and pick out something that's relevant for you. So it's important to remember that look at resources, look towards your company, look towards your resources externally, a lot of companies out there. Also, we've talked about flex hours and job shares. Remember that that's so important that hours at home stay hours at home, even though you're at home all the time. If you have the ability within your position to say, okay, I'm working from 8 to 5, but I can really only have meetings, let's say from 9 to 4. That 8 to 9 might be, going through your to-do list or doing some strategic planning or something. Or maybe that 8 to 9 is your commute time. That's still your commute time. Even if it's just a 2-minute walk down the hall, that's your commute time. Maybe if you listen to a podcast, you sit on the couch and you listen to a podcast. Or maybe if your children are home, you take care of those children in a different way than you would have. You set them up for school. Or maybe if your elder cares, you have the elders around, or you need to go visit them and bring them food. Remember to compartmentalize your day. Just because you're at home doesn't mean that you have more work time, right? It's really important for your health and your sanity. Also talk to your company. If you're interested in career growth, that can help provide that feeling of fulfillment. Are you ready for it? Can you handle it? And don't hesitate to reach out to your EAP. Even before COVID, I've always countered employees, what's your EAP? What does it do? Really? They provide that? I didn't know that. Look to your EAP. There's a lot of services and benefits, from everything, not just major life changes like moving or a death in the family or anything like that. They can help with a lot of mental health and services and resources. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I can't emphasize that enough for a lot of companies. So let's talk about some real tangible tips for some of these challenges, right? So meal planning. I know there's been some sessions on Health New England, I think, about meal planning, so I won't go too deep, but this yes/no technique can also be used for that. So for instance, yes, I'm going to chop my vegetables tonight. No, I'm not going to do my dishes. Yes, I'm going to play with the kids, or I'm going to call up my mom who's been home alone all day. And no, I'm not going to do the dishes. You notice how I keep saying no to do the dishes? Because I get said no in my house a lot. So you pick and choose, and it's okay. And then the next morning, it might be, yes, I'm doing the dishes, and no, I'm not doing, let's say, my meditation, right? And that's okay. And then at night, it's I'm doing my meditation and I'm not watching TV, whatever it is, but you pick and choose. Batch cooking, cook once, eat twice. Use recipes that you can, chop up vegetables that you can put into scrambled eggs, then maybe tacos, then on top of a pizza, then just sauteed. Try to be efficient and enlist your kids. Sit at the table and chop with them. If you have children age that are like 4, 3, it's great practical life skills, really good. They have Montessori knives, that are very sharp. Have them peel things. They really can do a lot more than you realize. Juggling identities, that's another one. If you're with your spouse and you feel like you two are just burnt out, right? Try to set aside like a date night or time, wherever it works, even if it's in the middle of the day. If some reason nobody's around, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you guys maybe, have lunch, have a beer, whatever it is, but do something to rekindle old habits. Did you play cards? Did you have games? What did you do when you first met? What can you do as a couple to rekindle and reignite? And then also delegate. Sometimes, you need to help, you need to get one identity, you need to delegate the other one. Maybe you need to delegate being a dad to your spouse, and then you can be who you were before you were a dad. The same thing. Understand that some identities shift to fore and background. Sometimes you are going to be a child, your parents' caregiver. So the child role has now reverted to being an adult and caregiver role. And sometimes you're back to being a mom or a dad, or sometimes you are a friend. And sometimes that friend takes a back seat while you're extending yourself in these other areas. So remember that certain identities, they don't disappear, they just shift to the fore and the background. And you try to learn when to bring them forward and backwards and not resent when one has to go away. There's a lot more that can be said on that topic. But I think for now, just understand that you can have multiple identities that shift back and forth. In terms of partner communication, there's a threshold for tasks. I like the dishes done the night that we've eaten the food, and they put away and they're clean within a good, hour after we've eaten. That didn't happen in our household for a while. It used to get done the next morning and I hated it. But I had to accept that that's what my husband did, and it got done. And you know what? We had a threshold, and I was like, okay, if it's going to happen within a certain period of time, it has to be this certain period of time. So there's a lot of things like that you need to talk about. Threshold for tasks. How long does it need to take until it will, make you bust? Balance deep conversations with play, fun and relaxing ones. Remember, it's not always about, how you're going to take care of the in-laws or the parents or costs. It's not always about child rearing. You remember to talk about, find some funny things on, YouTube to watch or anywhere, or, maybe read a book, something, but try to make those deep conversations not the only conversations. And reach out for help again if you're in that sandwich generation. That sandwich generation is getting it from all angles, and it's really helpful that if for your relationship with your partner to survive, you've got to make sure you have those strong communications. For self-care, sleep is a form of self-care. It is okay to choose sleep over, let's say, getting up and doing exercise, right? It is just as restorative as important, but remember to balance it. Pick a date and time and stick to it. It's 12 o'clock on Thursdays from 12 to 1. That is my self-care time. Block out your calendar if you can. Do something for yourself. Just do it once a week. Start small and then increase as you need to. And enlist others, talk to your spouse. Say, look, can you please just, hang out with the kids or take care of the in-laws for an hour while I go take a bike ride, whatever it is, get some friends, walk outdoors with those you feel comfortable with in a safe way, and then slow down. And this is what I talked about before with the 10 tips to slow down. We have a handout that you'll be receiving for that. And it's really, really, really helpful for understanding that slowing down can actually help you be more productive. And lastly, screen time. I know we've all been on it all the time. Try to use it outside of the necessary times minimally. Try to get board games. Really try to almost avoid it as much as possible when you're not, when you don't have to do it. You don't have to use it. And read before bed a book. Do not look at screens. Again, that's another whole conversational topic of screen times before bed, but always about 30 minutes before bed to have no more screen time. And it can be addictive and toxic, and be careful of social media, as we all know what that leads to. Need I say more, but just try to remember to try to, minimize the screen time and go for the real time, especially these days. And it's really important because understanding all these things that influence your mental states, because all of these stressors and all of these challenges affect your mental state. And then your mental state, right? All of these things affect it. Caregiving needs, especially because your mental state can be these: anxiety, stress, fear, excitement, love, anticipation, all these things, especially guilt. So knowing how all of those previous items I mentioned, financial concerns, caregiving, job changes, affect your mental states, because your mental state affects your physical response. Okay. And that's important because your physical response has a hormonal response. And I'll tell you why this is all important, to really hit home why we need to focus on this self-care and this juggling issue. It's not just about like holistic wellness, blah, blah, blah. It's about making sure you're physiologically okay, right? Because it has an effect on you. Too much anxiety, too much fear, you overproduce cortisol, which too much cortisol in your body affects your immune function. Immunity, there's that big word. Heart disease, blood pressure, weight, and more. Inflammation. And when you have too much inflammation, we all know that's really not very good for your body. A lot of diseases thrive on inflammation. So to circle it all back again, being aware of the mental state, anxiety, fear, guilt, and how they affect your body allows you to guide your mental states to a less destructive direction. So it's very key to try to quell that fear, quell that stress, because it's going to have a negative response system in your body when you have too much of those heightened negative mental states, right? Because what happens? Too much of it, you got weight gain, you overreact, get angry, you got pain. Maybe you yell a little bit more, which is okay. Maybe we lose our patience, then we feel bad about it. And that endless cycle is recreated again, right? And then it has physical effects. I know I get IBS, pain, bloating. I scrunch my face too much. Some people grit their teeth. I get irritable. My husband and I snap at each other. Not healthy, right? And so that's why it's important to understand this, because it's really key that we don't want to have too many negative mental states. So back to the tips. When you're starting to feel stressed, when you feel like you're about to strangle something, somebody, or someone, and you just can't have it anymore, meetings and kids and this and that, try to implement a calming technique. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's guided imagery. Maybe it's some exercise. I remember I used to aromatherapy when I was working at one of my high-powered industry jobs. I had a little aromatherapy bottle of lavender. And when I was starting to feel really stressed, we did a lot of events. They were high profile. I actually would just open up the bottle and just do a small, just light breath of lavender. And it was just, I think I'm going to start putting it at my computer now again. It's really helpful. Mantras are really helpful too. And we'll talk about that. Anytime you set an intention or goal, try to have a mantra. I love you. I will try not to do this again. We need to get out the door. We need to get out the door. We need to get out the door. That was my mantra for my daughter when she wouldn't, when she was getting ready for school. And it helped me not over communicate to her about why she needs to get out the door and how she shouldn't yell at me. I just said, get out the door. It's time to go to school. Get out the door. It was very zen and it helped. So find the mantra that helps you get through the situation. So let's go to talk about parent and caregiver guilt. And the reason why, again, is because guilt is a big thing. I know many people feel guilt. It's like, I haven't called my parents. I have so much going on. I don't know how to take care of them. I don't know how we're going to pay for this. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what we should be doing with our kids and how are we going to have them? And am I feeling, and I'm kind of making that mental note in your head, right? So it's important to understand why guilt happens and what does it mean. So oftentimes guilt happens when we've been pushed, right? Your patience gets taxed. There's the kids are acting out. There's lack of attention. There's control, and the patience gets up to here. It also happens because we're doing too much. Maybe the household operations, maybe we're distracted. Encouraging healthy food is an uphill battle. Maybe you're tired of constantly helping your parents with technology issues and constantly having to explain things to them about how we're supposed to take care of this or what they should do or, whatever it is. And that we forget kids are kids and parents are parents. And that COVID is constantly here, always reminding us, right? And so the lack of patience is completely understandable. Note that mommy daddy guilt and also caregiver guilt is an equal opportunity affliction. The experts say it strikes whether you're 20, 40, CEO of your home, or Fortune 500 company, right? It happens no matter what. But caregiver guilt is okay. Why? Because it means you care. It means you're not perfect. You are not perfect at all. It means that you are modeling imperfection and humanity. Do not let the guilt get to you. Every day is a new day, and you just got to set a positive mantra to do the best. Okay. Don't let it get to you, because when it gets to you, that's when then you start having those self-sabotage techniques. So why lack of patience? We've talked about work stress, no self-care, time, others, right? When do you not lose your patience? Are there times when you don't lose your patience? Hone in on those times and remember those times, and then think about what was it that helped you not lose your patience. Maybe you had a cup of tea. Maybe you had done some self-care. Maybe just you said a mantra. So think about why, okay? And why does it surface? Is it surfacing because you think you're not listening, or you're too focused on the house, or not affectionate enough? You think you're being a bad role model. Parenting is full of regrets, and it's a matter of not permitting ourselves to be controlled by those regrets, chalking them up to a lack of knowledge or maturity, and moving on so we can continue and be our better self. And that's from psychology today. Don't underestimate that you need to move on and move forward. We can continue to alter our behavior. These are some quick ones I won't spend too much time on here, but I love these. You can go to this Parrington.com article, but all these things with guilt, it's everywhere. So don't beat yourself up. You can have guilt about anything. We're told to have guilt, but don't succumb to it. Remember that it's a cue to tell you maybe you might need to change your behavior. So how do we overcome it? I always say guilt-ridden parents are the best, right? There's unnecessary guilt. Right? And if there's unnecessary guilt, you try to, again, move on, move forward, say, okay, you know what? I feel bad about this. I love you. I'll try not to do this again. Right? Tomorrow I will put a calendar invite to call my in-laws and check in on them. And I will do it for 5 minutes, 3 days a week. And that is it. If you have actually done something that is really, that you feel is really hurtful or harmful, except say, okay, I said this thing wrong. Express honest regret, and then commit not to repeat it, and then make amends and ask for forgiveness and forgive yourself. So again, that goes back to that mantra. And I know I've done this. Sometimes I've just lost it. I've just yelled at my daughter, and I've just gotten so upset, and I'm just so angry. And later I go, I should not have done that. And I say, I'm sorry. That was not the healthy behavior. I forgive you. I hope you forgive me. I love you. And we hug. And we regroup and reconnect right after that, right? I am not perfect. You are not perfect. It's how you get over those feelings of lack of control and lack of patience that works. It's not going to be perfect every day, but remember that every day is a new day, and you can keep working on it, right? And you think, we don't have time to go through this today, but think to yourself, how do you deal with frustration? Maybe after this is over, say, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with irrational behavior, right? In the heat of the moment, what do you do? And how can you cultivate and foster more patience? By encouraging self-care, taking deep breaths. What is it? And why is it important? Because again, when too much of that heightened enraged state, too much of that, fear and anxiety and resentment, it produces that cortisol response. You become more, that has that physiological response. And instead, those deep breaths, that focus on the present, that relaxation, those calming techniques, that self-care can help refocus and recenter yourself so that you aren't letting the craziness take over, which is definitely can happen. And again, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's a process. So managing patience, convicted to caregiving, convicted to choices. I'm convicted, I'm going to set my boundaries. This is the kid time. This is the parent time. This is the work time. Try to model the behavior. I notice sometimes when I get frustrated with something, I maybe like with my own thing, and oh, why did that not work? Or I'm driving. Why did that person cut me off? And I see my daughter, oops, maybe I should think about that. And that helps me be a better response, have a better response. Oftentimes when someone's upset, accept, and that can help you. Sometimes the lack of patience is like, why are you getting so upset? Why are you having this tantrum? Why is this such a big deal, right? Your parents might be getting annoyed with the technology. Why can't you just figure it out? Step back and say, you know what? I get it. It's frustrating. I'd be really upset if that kid took my toy at the playground. I'd be really upset that I can't go do this, or I'm really upset. I get you. I'm upset too. Let's talk about it. And it's easier said than done, but just try it once and then try it again. Try another time. Have some type of little trigger. Maybe, think about, take again, a couple deep breaths, but there's a trigger that makes you say, I accept that you had those feelings. How can we move forward? Breathing works well. Tag team with spouse. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of that same thing of being in the present, not thinking about 7 other things, because oftentimes thinking about those 7 other things makes you stressed out, and why we lose our patience. If you need an adult timeout, take it. Listen, I got to go to my room. I do that a lot now. I say, nope, I'm going. But sometimes it'll shock your kid. If you go, I'm going to take a timeout, and if they've taken timeouts, they're like, what? Oh, okay. Remember, great line, kiddos are not trying to give you a hard time. They are having a hard time, and they don't know how to deal with it. It's hard enough for us. I mean, your prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop till you're 25, which deals a lot with emotions and emotional regulation. So remember that. They're having a hard time. You also receive some handouts about positive mindset and positive psychology. These exercises will help you understand how having a positive mindset and cultivating some positivity, gratitude, what do I have? How can I think about this in a different way? Well, actually, it's like meditation. It's practice for your brain so that when the stressful situation occurs, you've practiced to rely on those positive emotions to get through it. So again, it's more like practice so that when the crisis does occur, you're relying on some training. So these are some things in review as we close out. Note when the irritation starts, think before you speak or react, breathe together, slow down. It's okay to be in discomfort. Remember that. That's part of the patience. Lack of patience also comes from lack of acceptance and understanding that it's tough right now. It's okay. Cut yourself a break, right? And then, let's see, pick one of these today. Are you doing a yes/no technique? Can you be present? Don't should yourself. Remember, guilt does equal caring, and it can help you stay in check. And remember that it can help you not have one of these reactions, right? Sometimes we pick these reactions, we rely on these toxic indulgences or vices. They're fine sometimes, but when you rely on them to appease the guilt, to appease the stress, to appease the juggling, it becomes that negative cycle of coping. And that's when then you end up having all of the physical effects that when you have calming techniques, we have the physical effects of homeostasis, blood sugar regulation, but also metaphysical. You can concentrate more, you can improve your sleep, improve your communication. So don't shoot down how just maybe like 5 minutes of yoga every day can do a lot to improve your concentration versus trying to do too much of one thing once a week, right? So like 5 minutes every day will set you up for a consistent goal. And to remember to take care of yourself. So in closing, remember, evaluate, get support. Stress will happen. It's normal. It's how we react that matters. Spend time with the people you care about and who care about you. Try to allow quiet time for daily reflection and acknowledge your thoughts, be body aware. So most of all, remember that you control what you can control. Remember to say yes and no to certain things, and that self-care will help you be a better caregiver. So I want to thank you all today. I know we've run up against time. I am available for questions. So I can actually go ahead and look at some questions. And then I know that I will also say, I know Julia may be wrapping up, that I am also available for questions via email. So feel free to contact me. One of them is, do you suggest being stricter or looser with schedules during this time? Good question. I actually would say that I think it would actually be good to be stricter with schedules at this time because it's going to provide some sense of balance and continuity for you and your family. If everybody, especially smaller children and even elders too, they know what's going to happen. And with all this uncertainty, the more we know, I think the more comfortable we feel. And so, whatever schedule that is, it can be small, it can be a large one, try to communicate it and have some room for wiggle room within that to some degree. So for instance, 12 to 1 is lunchtime, could be free time, right? But within that free time, or it could be self-care time, right? That self-care time, within that you could have choice. But it's important to know that like that block of time is for that self-care. Another question is, as one caring for my mother and grandchildren with such different needs, is there a smart way to track paperwork, medications in one place? That is a very, very good question. There are so many tools out there. Sometimes it depends. Often I say if you're a paper person versus a computer person. I'm a paper person, honestly, so I do it on paper. But oftentimes I don't think that there is a app or program. I'm not aware of one. Sometimes a lot of people use Asana. Asana is what a lot of companies use. I know that it's really good for like project planning. So when you think about paperwork and medications, sometimes a basic calendar or even like those Asana project plans can help. So that is it. I guess I'll hand it over to you, Julia. And again, like I'm happy to answer more questions. I know we've run up to time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kirsten. That was excellent information. I know a lot of us can relate. I know I'll definitely be trying to have that calming mantra for patients. I think as a mom of young kids, that's something that I need to work on. So thank you so much for all the information. Again, like she said, if you guys want to reach out to her, there is her email address, and you can ask any questions that were not asked today or were answered. So thank you everyone for being here. If it's your first time or if you've been through the whole series, we appreciate your time. I'm Julia from the Health Management Department at Health New England. As Keith said, we ask you to please take a survey that you're going to get in a follow-up email, but that is also in the chat right now. So while you're here, take a moment to fill that out for us. We appreciate it. And then in that follow-up email, you'll also get the materials that Kirsten referenced, as well as the YouTube link for the recording. So if you need her email again, it will be on this slide in the recording. In 2 weeks, we have our final webinar of this series, which is crazy to think, on March 24th. And we're going to talk about how food and immunity matter. So we talk a lot about strengthening our immune system during this time. So we'll learn how our system can protect us against foreign invaders like viruses, and how we eat can help that. So we hope to see you guys then in 2 weeks. Thank you again, Kirsten, and have a good rest of your week, everyone.